Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about Elvis Presley, but more precisely, I'm going to be talking about Elvis Presley in the 70s. This is probably a very maligned period of his career, at least the second part of it. And I'm not going to go to great lengths, but I'll sort of, explain some of the things that happened. Like, first off, we're going to try to hit as many of the studio albums and the live albums that came out. I'm not going to hit any of the Pickwick albums, even though these did come out in the 70s and there were more than this. These albums consisted mostly of 60s soundtrack recordings. So even though this picture here is live from 1972 or whatever, it's actually all recordings from like 62 to 66. Same with Come On Everybody, and same with that and that as well. Let's Be Friends and Almost in Love. So I'm not going to be talking about any of those, but I will be talking about Elvis albums that were released during his lifetime. This isn't going to include anything that came out afterwards. So let's start off with the earliest recording, and that is On Stage, February 1970. This is a really good live album. This isn't like the live albums that came out later where it's like pretty much a complete show. This is like highlights from shows. And, it does start off with CC Rider, but it doesn't start off with, that big intro music and stuff. There's some really good versions. Elvis is in great voice at this time, and it's definitely a very fine live album by the King. Now, I know I said I was going to talk about stuff that was released during his lifetime, but I want to sort of stress a few things here. There's two box sets that came out from Elvis in Nashville and Elvis Back in Nashville. Both of these are 4 CD sets, and they cover a recording period when he recorded in Nashville, or actually 1970. And see, Elvis, here's a couple things that you're going to notice as I go through these, not including like the special things like this. Colonel Tom Parker would throw Elvis into the studio. Elvis would record 30 songs, and it would be spread out over the next year or two over, a series of singles and albums. So Elvis never really went in and, he didn't go, I'm going to go in and I'm going to record Elvis Country, or I'm going to record an album called Love Letters. Let's record 12 songs. It was never that. It was just, basically, he'd record songs, they'd take the best of those recordings, overdub, orchestration or backing vocals, and then they would release them on albums. Sometimes I wonder if Elvis even knew what was coming and what songs were on what albums. And you'll also notice that every album seems to have a picture of him live. And even the live albums, like Aloha from Hawaii or Madison Square Garden, those pictures on the cover have nothing to do with the concert contained in that release. So it's really, really frustrating. Elvis was run through the ringer by Colonel Tom Parker, and he did the best he could, but we all know how that story ended. So again, the next few albums I'm going to talk about stem from these sessions, and here, if you want to get a bunch of outtakes and raw versions and masters and stuff, definitely check both of these boxes out. So the next album that came from those sessions is Elvis, That's the Way It Is. This was a collection of live and studio recordings, essentially the soundtrack to the movie that sort of follows him rehearsing and then doing a performance. And this is a great album, has a lot of great songs on it. Certainly one of his finest albums. And like I said, it's both live and studio. The studio stuff, he sounds fantastic. Oh yeah, it's just absolutely wonderful. That came out in 1970. In 1971, also from those same sessions I talked about, was Elvis Country, another fantastic album. This is all studio, and it contains some great vocal performances by the King himself. The only thing that I don't care about this album is there's a song on it called I Was Born 1,000 Years Ago or something like that. And that song fades in and fades out in between songs. Sometimes that song that fades in and out is just kind of intrusive. You want to hear, these songs as they were. In fact, I believe all these songs are available in that Essential 70s box set without that thing going on in between the songs. Another album from those sessions came out in 1971. That's Love Letters from Elvis. And this isn't as strong as the two albums that came before, but still some fantastic recordings. Again, all the stuff is studio that I'm showing you, and it's all live pictures of Elvis. Elvis Sings the Wonderful World of Christmas. This is a much more relaxing album compared to his Christmas album from the 50s. This does have Merry Christmas Baby, which is a nice groove blues rock and roll song. But his version of Come All Ye Faithful is wonderful. A lot of unique arrangements. Elvis did have his band perform these songs to his arrangements, and there are some unique arrangements here. It's not as essential as the 50s Christmas album, but it's still very much worth your while because A, it's Elvis, and B, it's Christmas. The next album came out in 1972. It's called Elvis Now. This is not the strongest. This is kind of scraped together with stuff from different sessions. It even goes back to 1969 to the Memphis sessions with a kind of not very good version of Hey Jude. I mean, it's mediocre. I mean, it's Elvis. He sounds wonderful, but still not a great album. This is probably the weakest of the albums I'm going to show you, but there are still some high points on this. Definitely want to check it out. Elvis still is in fine vocal form, and that never changed. Now, also, apart from Christmas and soundtracks and pop albums, Elvis was also known for his gospel recordings. And He Touched Me came out in 1972. Is this the one that he won the Grammy for? Not sure, but he sounds wonderful on these recordings. You cannot deny the power of Elvis's voice. Now, here's a sort of period for Elvis where it got really, really loopy. There was an album that was scheduled to come out called Standing Room Only. And this album was going to be kind of like That's the Way It Is, where it's partial live, partial studio. And this is the album, it was going to have Burnin' Love, Always on My Mind, stuff like that. But they canceled this release because he was going to do a performance at Madison Square Garden. And that Madison Square Garden show came out like this. And that picture is the same picture from this album here. So they scrapped this and they used the same picture. They didn't even use the picture from Madison Square Garden, but it's a great performance by Elvis, full of energy, a lot more energy, I think, and a lot more raw than Aloha from Hawaii, which was coming very soon. Now, although mine's not in that great a shape, Elvis, Prince from Another Planet. This is a 2 CD and DVD collection of those Madison Square Garden performances. And it's really wonderful. Sounds great. And you get some rare home movie footage on it. Definitely something to check out if you are an Elvis fan and you only have Madison Square Garden. This has 2 different performances and a DVD. Now, also released around this time was the Elvis on Tour movie. Now, I'm not sure if there was an actual soundtrack plan for it, but that was scrapped, obviously, because of Madison Square Garden. Just like Standing Room Only, scrapped, and all the stuff remained unreleased until this box set that just came out in January of 2023. So let's go on to one of his biggest albums, and that's Aloha from Hawaii. I think that the Madison Square Garden show, as I said before, it's much more raw, energetic. Here he seemed a little bit stiff because he was nervous. It was being simulcast via satellite on around the world. What's really weird is all the other countries got it live. America didn't get it until April of that year. So we had to wait 3 or 4 months. I think the album was out already by the time it was shown on TV. But this is the album. Again, the picture is not from the Aloha concert. They really cheaped out on Elvis there. But this comes with this little thing here. And here's probably one of the most embarrassing things ever. There is a picture of these beautiful women surrounding Elvis. But if you can tell, Elvis is just basically cut and paste. You can see that he's just added into that picture. And I don't know what Colonel Parker was thinking back then, but it certainly wasn't doing Elvis any favors. But here is the inner sleeve there, and there's the cover. Elvis, Aloha from Hawaii, still an absolute classic album. Now let me throw this in here. This is a Follow That Dream version of Aloha from Hawaii. This is actually a remixed version, and it sounds amazing, much better than the other versions that have been out. And it includes the afternoon show, and it includes outtakes. It's incredible. If you love Aloha from Hawaii and you want to hear Elvis, his voice even more powerful, the drums and the instrumentation even more powerful, definitely get the Elvis Aloha from Hawaii via satellite. Follow that dream release. And then also in 1973, out came the Fool album, and this does have some really good songs on it. It's not a strong album, and of course, the picture is looks like it's from Aloha, so it's taken the same year as this album came out. So this does have some really good songs on it, and of course, it advertises his previous 2 live albums. This is definitely stronger than Elvis Now, which, like I said, that has some good songs, but it's just not a good flow. It sounds like it's a scraped together album. This sounds like a little bit better than that. Now, in 1973, he spent some time in Stax Studios, and these were also legendary sessions. I personally don't think that he was as into it as he was in the Nashville and in the Memphis sessions, but there is a 3 CD set that features his recordings from those sessions. Again, I know this didn't come out during his lifetime, but it will explain the next few albums as well. He's not as engaged with the music, but he still sounds great because you know why? He's Elvis. Now, the next album I'm not too fond of. It's called Raised on Rock, or For Old Time's Sake. Now, Raised on Rock, I believe, was written by Dennis Lind, who also wrote Burnin' Love. Raised on Rock is one of my least favorite Elvis songs ever in the entire universe. I can't even listen to it. I hate to be mean like that, but there are some other good performances on here. Again, I think Colonel Tom Parker was just, scraping studio sessions and throwing some stuff together just to get it out on the market. Because remember, you got live albums, you got tours, you got those Pickwick albums. The market was overflooded with Elvis. They should have taken their time, but they didn't because Colonel Tom Parker was looking for money. Also from those Stax sessions came the album Good Times. Now, this initially, when I used to listen to this back in the late 70s, I wasn't real fond of it, but I've become fond of this album. I love his version of Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues. And again, when was that picture taken? Who knows? Probably 3 years before this album came out. But there is that album. I mean, so far, the albums I've talked about, Raised on Rock and Elvis Now, are the only ones I'm not too confident about. Maybe those aren't, great 70s gateway albums, but everything else here I think is, and Good Time should be added to that list as well. So it's a nice gateway album into the 70s. Oh my gosh, it had been a year without a live album, so of course out comes Elvis, recorded live on stage in Memphis. And this is a really good album. There's new material here. It's not Aloha or Madison Square Garden, but certainly one that you should check out if you are a fan of Elvis and a fan of his live albums. Still drawing from those Stax sessions, I think that Promised Land is a strong album, believe it or not, because usually they would scrape the best stuff and put it on an album, and then maybe the secondary material put on an album, and then the bottom of the barrel they would put on another album. This actually seemed like they saved the best material for this. Even though Good Times is a good record, Promised Land is even better and even stronger. And of course, it's got the song Promised Land, which has become a favorite for Elvis fans. So that came out in 75 and is definitely worth your time. But before I go ahead, I wanted to show you something that came out, I think at the tail end of 74, before the Promised Land album. And it was an import album. It wasn't released in America, but it was a compilation that came out in Australia, UK, parts of Europe. And it was called Elvis Hits of the 70s. And this is the FTD version that has the original hits of the 70s that came out on the album overseas, and then more bonus material. So that's definitely something to check out if you want a nice overview of his 70s material. Now back to his final 3 albums that was released during his lifetime. That's going to be Elvis Today. Very strong album. Definitely blows away most of the stuff that I've talked about. It's all new sessions. It definitely sounded like he was rejuvenated. And I love this logo. I wish somebody would put out a shirt without logo. I would buy that in a heartbeat. Now, his next 2 albums are from the infamous Jungle Room sessions that happened in 76. The first album, again, frustrating as hell. Great album cover, first off. And it's from Elvis Presley Boulevard, Memphis, Tennessee. And look at that. It says recorded live, right? This is an album. It has a live picture. Like I said, every one of these albums have live pictures. You never know what's studio, what's live. This even says recorded live. I don't understand the marketing here. Okay, so it was recorded maybe live in the Jungle Room, but it's not live in front of an audience. And it has a lot of overdubs like strings and things like that. But it's a wonderful album. It's one of my favorite Elvis albums because he sounds almost defeated. He sounds strong vocally and emotional. And he's like pulling these songs from deep down and just letting them out. This is a very sad album. In my opinion, it's got wonderful songs like Hurt and For the Heart. Those are upbeat, but he sounds broken and he sounds emotional. And it is just a riveting listen because he's really connecting with the songs like never before. And it's really fantastic album. I love this album. Now, equal to that, of course, is his final album released during his lifetime, which is Moody Blue. These are from the same studio sessions. Title track is one of his greatest pop songs of the 70s, but it's got some incredible songs. Unfortunately, it's also got a live song that they pulled from that Memphis album in 1974. His version of Unchained Melody is a live version, but it's beautiful. It's wonderful. And just a lot of great songs on that. And that is the final album that he released during his lifetime. I know I didn't go into depth on some of these albums, but I just wanted to, maybe give you an overview of his music in the 70s. It's so much worth your while. A lot of people go, oh, well, I don't like the Jumpsuit Years, but you know what? You're missing out. You are. I mean, if there's some great material. No, there's no Hound Dog or Don't Be Cruel or Return to Sender. There's nothing just, glorious and wonderful, big hits that, changed rock and roll, nothing like that. But there's some great material during this period that usually just gets pushed aside when people focus on Elvis. They basically focus on the 50s and the 60s. But, remember the 70s gave us, You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, Burnin' Love, Always on My Mind, some of Elvis's greatest recordings. And he just such a vocal powerhouse up until the very end. So I appreciate you hanging out with me for a little while as I talk about Elvis in the 70s. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.